Hello, everyone. My name is Brad Hornback, and I'm the lead community manager here at Patients Like Me. We're teaming up with the Sanofi team to bring you this webinar on the importance of patient participation in research, especially clinical trials. Today, I'm joined by Patients Like Me member Lisa, who has participated in many different clinical trials, to have an engaging discussion about clinical research, why you should get involved, and how you can sign up. Lisa, why don't you start by telling us a little about yourself and how you first got involved in clinical research?
Hi, thanks for inviting me, Brad. I got involved in clinical research fairly early on because when I first was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, it was the mid 90s and there weren't a lot of drugs out there. And my neurologist was thrilled to prescribe a medication to me because before there were no medications. But unfortunately, the medication that he prescribed did not stop the very aggressive relapsing remitting MS that I had. And so I was still having um, really, really bad symptoms. So right away, I was looking for more medicines. And very quickly, there were only, I think, 3 MS drugs out at the time, if that. And so very quickly, I ran out of viable options. And so I wanted more possibilities for people with MS. And the only way to get those possibilities is clinical trials, is to develop more drugs. So if I wanted more medicine, I had to get involved.
Thank you, Lisa, for sharing your experience with MS and what sparked your interest in clinical trials. We're so happy to have you here today to add a valuable first person point of view to this discussion. And your story is a perfect example of how taking your medical journey into your own hands and seeking non traditional paths to find answers can really make a difference. So, Lisa, why has it been important for you to participate in medical research?
Well, it started very personally, Brad, because I was feeling desperate because multiple sclerosis is a debilitating disease. I had a young son, and my prognosis was that I'd be constrained to a wheelchair within 10 years. And I looked at all the different symptoms because MS can strike anywhere on your central nervous system. I looked at all the symptoms that one could have and all of the abilities that one could lose, and it's everything. I had everything to lose. And so I felt an urgency to find a treatment that would stop this aggressive illness. It was important for me because the medicines that were out there to treat MS at the time in the mid 90s were inadequate. I tried what I could do, I tried the medication I could do, and it failed me early on. And my MS was still progressing. And the danger for me was if I did nothing, then my MS would progress. And if I did something, the MS could stop. There was a chance of stopping. So it made more sense for me to do something than to do nothing. And it made more sense to me to participate in a clinical trial so that we could have more alternatives available to the MS community. So that, even if I wasn't personally going to have a success in one particular medicine, perhaps somebody else would, because MS is just horrible. And there's really everything you can do to stop MS. Why not do it? That's certainly how I felt.
That's truly inspiring. You've really highlighted how important it is to view patients as partners in this process. Without patients providing firsthand knowledge and experience about their conditions, researchers are only getting half the picture. And if only half the picture is presented, the treatments won't be as effective. Patient contributions can also set the course for treatment approvals. And your experience shows that clinical trial participation is helpful for the individual and for the entire disease community. Now, the question is, how do patients know if the trial is right for them? Lisa, how do you personally determine if a research study is right for you? What questions should patients ask before enrolling in a new research study?
That's a really big question. Um, I think part of it has to be your own urgency. And your own urgency will have to do with what kind of participation you're going to be involved in. I had the urgency of a very aggressive case of MS. And so because of that, I was willing to start working on a medicine that at the time wasn't even on a clinical trial yet. There was just research where I could just see parallels between MS and this disease, this other disease. And I thought, well, yeah, to me, it makes sense. So I went ahead and took like a huge risk. And the medicine that I took a risk on later turned out to go through a clinical trial. And later I entered the clinical trial, and later still, and I went through every single, in a way, every single phase. I watched every single phase of that medicine over years. And I went to the National Institutes of Health every month to get a new dose of the medication. And it worked for me great. And it worked for everyone that I met in the halls great. And so I saw my own MS get arrested. I stopped getting relapses. But you also have to first see, is it right for me? If you're a patient and you want to join a clinical trial, there are a few venues, like trusted venues, that you could pursue. The one I'm aware of is clinicaltrials.gov. And when you go on clinicaltrials.gov, you want to look for a medication that seems to you like a trial that just seems right for you. That depends on what your level or tolerance for risk is. But also the clinical trial itself, they'll be screening you as well to see, they're looking for certain things, and they might know already that if you have a predilection for cancer in your family, probably this is not the drug for you. So you have to tell them, you have to be very forthcoming about everything that you know about your own health and about your genetic dispositions, so that they have as much information as they need. And there has to be like a lot of communication back and forth between you and the researchers. And you have to tell them, I mean, it could be, I know that like with the clinical trial that I was really, really interested in getting in, when I first heard about it, I was anxious because I'd have to fly to Washington, D.C. And I didn't know if I could afford to fly every month to Washington, D.C. And so I told them, I have an anxiety. I'm afraid I won't be able to afford to do this. And as it turned out, they could pay for me to fly to Washington, D.C. And then I had fatigue with MS. And so I was like, it might be a lot for me to like fly to Washington, D.C., do all this stuff and fly back. And they're like, no, no, no. We'll put you in a hotel the night before, get a good night's sleep. We don't want to even see you until you're rested. And then come along and we'll do like a full day's work. It really was.
Absolutely. Patients are the key in all sorts of medical research, especially clinical trials, all throughout the process. And one of the interesting points that you made was talking about the phases of a clinical trial and going throughout that process. And I think phases in a clinical trial might be confusing to some people if they're not familiar with how everything works. So while there are different types of clinical trials, generally, most follow a rigorous series from early, small scale phase 1 studies to late stage, large scale phase 3 studies. If a treatment is successful in one stage, it'll move on to the next one. During phase 1 studies, researchers generally test a new drug in healthy volunteers. The primary purpose of a phase 1 study is to evaluate the safety of a new drug candidate before it proceeds further in the clinical trials. In a phase 2 study, researchers will administer the drug to a larger group of patients with the disease or condition for which the drug is being developed to assess its effectiveness and safety. A key focus of phase 2 studies is determining the optimal dose and administration of the drug to maximize possible benefits while minimizing risks. And phase 3 is usually the final and largest phase of the study. Researchers design phase 3 studies, among other things, to demonstrate whether or not a drug offers a treatment benefit to a specific population and can serve as the basis for product labeling. Lisa, since you've participated in different phases of clinical trials, what are some of the questions that people should ask before they sign on?
Certainly, you should always ask. I say safety first. Like safety is the most important thing. And then, as I mentioned before, your comfort level. Don't be afraid to list any sort of anxieties that you have about this study. It's your agency, it's your body, and you have to keep checking in with how you feel and keep checking in with the administrator. I would say explain, what what is going on, what your problems are, and maybe they can come meet you halfway and see if they can help you a little bit too. Maybe the thing that you think is unsurmountable, they've surmounted already.
You never know till you ask.
Correct.
And those insights are incredibly valuable for people who are thinking about getting involved in a clinical trial, because you're absolutely right. Patients should only enroll in studies they feel comfortable with and that they're eligible for and that work for them. And they should evaluate that throughout the entire process and be very much in contact with the investigators and letting them know what they're thinking and how it's working and how everything's going for them. Um, and while clinical trial research is critical to advancing treatments and health outcomes, they're just one type of study that seeks to advance research. Another type, known as observational studies, work to answer questions about our biology, daily life, and how the environment affects our health. Lisa, what types of studies have you been a part of? And in your opinion, what can researchers do to help patients truly feel like partners?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, one piece of research that I'm working on right now is there's a new, well, it's not even new anymore, but we all got this cell phone, and in it are these sort of reproductions of the same sort of tests that one would have if you go to a neurologist office and they're just checking up on your 6-month checkup with MS to see the progression of your disease. And so they come in the forms of little games, and I just do things like, one will be like a tapping game, like how quickly can I tap with my feet? Or one might be a game of how quickly I can trace the spiral. Um, and and so the games are easy, and they manage to show over time if there's any really, really subtle changes in my coordination. So, but in terms of communication, at one point, another one of the games was that it's called a symbol digit test, and you get the same thing when you go to an actual neurologist office. And that's where you're going to be getting 10 different symbols and 10 numbers, digits. And then you're supposed to then you're supposed to see the symbol and write down the number. And so I noticed early on when I was doing this that there were really like 9 pairs and one freak or whatever symbol. And so I used to, when I did the symbol digit test, I would click both of the pieces on a pair. Like a pair might be, say, a line with a dot under it, and then a different one was a line with a dot over it, and say one was 2 and one was 7. And so when it would come to, when I would see either one of those symbols, I would just press them both. And and in this way, I halved my score for the simple digit test. So it seemed like I was like a really fast person, which I'm not. And I seemed like a super genius. And so I enjoyed cheating on that for a while. And then I finally decided to tell the investigator, this is how I cheat on this. And they were, of course, thrilled to get that information. And the next time that I did it, they had changed they changed their coding a little bit, so you can't just tap on 2 answers simultaneously, in the hope of one working. So I lost that, but we all won, because now it's a more effective thing. And this is really great, because I'm really hoping that eventually anybody with MS, especially people who live in rural areas and have difficulty commuting to a doctor's office, or just, I guess, in overall, I think it would be just better if people could do more of these tests more constantly. Maybe MS doesn't always wait every 6 months to make a change. Maybe doctors could find out the subtle changes going on in your immune system a lot faster if they have this program. And the more accurate the program is, the more the doctor can serve their patient. So I'm happy if I helped to make it a little bit more accurate, and just have what I think will be a really great technology available to just make this so much more accessible to more people. So that's an example of why communication between the patient and the doctor, it's a real thing. And yeah, we do make real change.
That's a really interesting study. And it really, you being able to cheat and tell them how you were cheating really kind of underscores how valuable collaboration is in a successful study. I mean, you have to feel comfortable enough to raise your concerns and share your actual experiences to get that accurate data to really help yourself and to help others. And at patients like me, we're dedicated to elevating the patient voice and ensuring that patients like you feel supported throughout their healthcare journey, including throughout research opportunities. And Lisa, we're reaching the end of our time together. So I'm going to ask one final question. What would you say to patients looking to get into research studies, but they're nervous or they don't know where to sign up?
Well, I personally would go to clinicaltrials.gov to look up for research studies. I would also, if you're really nervous, if you have a chronic illness, a lot of times you can feel really overwhelmed. I would try to also find a support base. Maybe you don't have just the energy or the courage or whatever. I mean, you do have the courage. You really do deep down inside if you want to go and participate in a clinical trial, but you might need the support. So maybe you've got like an Aunt Mildred who has time on her hands aplenty. And Aunt Mildred can go and look at clinicaltrials.gov for you. Or maybe you have an uncle or a brother or a cousin who want to help you in some way. I always think it's better to have a big, wide support group and see when every once in a while when the chips are down, let someone else do that work because you're already doing the work of having to live with a chronic disease. And then when they've got their results in, they can report to you. You are the CEO of your own illness, and you should just take charge.
I love the idea of becoming the CEO of your own illness. I mean, you really are an advocate for yourself in this process, and participating in clinical trials can give patients a feeling of empowerment for being able to take at least some control of their healthcare journey. Lisa, you've shared so many insightful responses, and thank you for engaging in this discussion on the importance of patient participation in research. I think your story will inspire many other people to explore clinical trial enrollment. And thank you again for being a part of our conversation today. And to all of you watching, thank you for joining us. If you're living with MS and are interested in clinical trials, another excellent resource is mymstrials.com. Check it out and see what opportunities are available.